Professor Jules Allen has been with us for many years at Queensborough Community College in the Department of Art and Design. He has an extraordinary personal narrative, and it really did presage an even more extraordinary life as a photographer, internationally known photographer, and most of all, as an extraordinary professor. Many of his students are here and have been with him and returned to visit with him over the years. Dr. Allen, Professor Allen is a celebrated professional photographer, and he's certainly renowned for capturing the essence of the urban experience, the Black experience. I think what I find fascinating about Jules is his incredible migration through life in many different roles. He was educated and began his career in California. He was a psychiatric social worker, I believe. And it took him on this incredible odyssey of finding those elements and facets about people in art. So his photography, which has been shown throughout this country and the world in a variety of very prestigious museums and institutes, his photography really is a chronicle of people and of, as you will find out, an extraordinary insight into the wonderful lives of so many wonderful people who represent the Black experience. Jules has been shown, I want to read this because it really is impressive. He has received numerous grants and awards. In fact, he's the 2012 recipient of the QCC Excellence in Faculty Scholarship. He was one of several award winners. We do that every couple of years. You'll see his portrait outside up here on the brick wall on the upper level. He joins quite an array of very, very strong and talented faculty members here. And Jules's work has been exhibited in the Museum of Modern Art, the Studio Museum in Harlem, the Brooklyn Museum, the Smithsonian, the National Gallery of Art, and the Schomburg Center for Research in Black Culture. He will speak of it far more eloquently than I, so I'm going to join you and enjoy this extraordinary experience. Professor Jules Allen.
I have notes, and I will start with them, but I will deviate away from them as quickly as I start with them, I assure you. Give me one moment, please. They've got me wired in ways that you never make a living photographing like this, I tell you. Now I can't even whisper. My thoughts could be seen. Thank you for inviting me, and I'm appreciative, and I'm terribly uncomfortable and nervous because I don't do this. And I am honored to make a first-class effort to share with you hopefully some enlightening and pleasurable moments. I've been photographing for about 40 years. I've been teaching for 30 years. I'm born and raised in San Francisco. I was educated in San Francisco. I grew up in the middle of the city. I was born and raised into a highly sophisticated and aesthetic family. My parents were extremely articulate and visually organized around imagery, including specific Black culture, but also outside into the greater world. I grew up reading the New Yorker magazine, Esquire magazine, Playboy magazine, as a child in the middle of San Francisco. My parents subscribed to all this openly and shared them with us as children openly, and of course, editorialized each step of the way. So we were helped to form an opinion about what we were looking at. That's probably what led me initially to photography, other than the fact that I saw a photograph of Gordon Parks at the age of about 18, and he was so handsome and dashing that I asked my father who he was, and my father told me, and I said, whatever this guy does, that's what I am going to do, because I wanted to have a shearling coat and a mustache. And it was also at the approximate time that someone had photographed me and showed me 8x10 photographs of myself at the age of about 18. It was the first time I'd ever seen an 8x10 black and white photograph. And I was so overwhelmed that they took me into a dark room and began to share the availability of photography to me, and that it wasn't this mysterious foreign object that I could never have access to. I studied photography in college. I have an undergraduate degree in fine art photography. From San Francisco Cal State University, which was at that time being taught by faculty who were all students of the great landscape photographer Ansel Adams and Edward Weston and Wynne Bullock and all these wonderful people, Oliver Gagliani, and all these great photographers who are all landscape photographers, outdoor photographers, and what I later learned to term as vegetarian photographers. It wasn't long after I decided that that wasn't going to be my direct pursuit, and began to look for a way for myself to find a way for me to participate in photography, which led me to journalistic approach street photography, which then led me eventually to New York to study with some of the masters on the East Coast who were primarily street photographers. So I was talking to the chair of my department, Bob Rogers, whom I've worked with for 30 years in an extraordinary capacity, about having had a formal education in both schools of thought at very premium level on the West Coast with the finest West Coast landscape photographers, and on the East Coast with some very sophisticated street photographers, Roy de Carava and such, of which I later did a second master's degree with at Hunter College. At the end of my undergraduate degree, away with the notes. It was time to make the first real decision in my life, and whether or not I was going to study photography on a graduate level at that time. In talking to my professors and my faculty and colleagues, there was really no one for me to study with. And I began to understand that I didn't have enough information to really learn what I wanted to know, to photograph the way I wanted to photograph, which led me into a graduate program in clinical counseling psychology, which I spent the next 5 years practicing in outpatient and inpatient clinics and driving myself crazy. It was at that time, at the end of that tenure, I was about 28, 29 years old, that I decided that if I was going to ever really pursue photography, that my station was to be in New York. And so packed up and came to New York. First couple of years were, as you probably have heard from every emerging or burgeoning creative person, almost intolerable in terms of pain and struggle. But I began to make my way and found shows and exhibitions and began to get some notoriety. And then found employment here at Queensborough as an adjunct early on. This was going to be a pivotal moment in my life. in New York, coming to work here. Because simultaneously I had found Gleason's Gym, which was going to be the first body of work that I was to unveil to myself to learn what real photography in the way I wanted to do it was going to require. I spent 3 years between 1983 and 1985 photographing in Gleason's Gym, in which all of the very most important lessons that I was going to have to learn and address were going to be provided for me in that experience. How was I going to develop a personal vision? How was I going to learn to discipline myself? How was I going to learn to manage decision making? How was I going to learn to organize my sense to find my way in the world as a photographer when there were very few of my colleagues around who were doing what I thought I wanted to do? And it was during that time that I entered into a relationship with a gentleman on 9th Street. And we're not going to talk too much about that, but we began to explore development, personality, character, maturity, honesty, integrity, in a real way, and how all those things were going to be important to me if I was going to be able to get to what I thought I was after. It also was the beginning of a time where I had to learn that there's something called a personal vision, and that you're going to have to learn to find it. That body of work was published 2 years ago in a book called Double Up. It's photographs of over 3 years that we published here at Queensborough, myself, and where is he? There he is back there. For those of you who don't know, there's a gentleman in this room named Faustino Quintanillo, who I have had a 30-year ongoing relationship with that has been extraordinary. My man. And I'll talk a little bit more about he and I and our wonderful, wonderful, beautiful relationship. It was after that body of work that the idea of conjure and photography became a concept to me, in that through one body of work, it will lead you to another body of work. And at that particular time, I was beginning to develop a sense of self. And as I said in a lecture once before, with the completion of Double Up, it gave me street credit, or street credibility with other photographers in New York. And so I had clout. And so I was able to stand up with my peer and feel good about myself and the work I was doing, because I'd gotten these grants, I'd gotten these articles written about me, I was on my way. But then when the work ended, that's when discipline and character in my life began to take shape, because then that was only the beginning, and you had to follow that up with direction that you could create for yourself. I found that in a body of work called Hats and Hat Knots, which I will show you part of, and explain the relationship of the reality, documentary-based photography of the boxing gym Double Up versus a metaphorical approach to photography, in which I come up with a concept and then set out to prove it with photographs. A third body of work that I was actually blessed enough to find my way into was commercial photography, which immediately followed my body of work called Hats and Hat Knots. And that came about through teaching. And I had never worked as a commercial photographer before. And because things were happening for me creatively, my students, whom I have a very personal and personable and meaningful relationship with, always have had. My students said, look, You expect us to go out and do hats and hat knots? You're crazy. How can we make a living doing this? At which point I had to say, well, go get a job. And they were like, well, how? We're not prepared for that, which at that time was the first time that I had to make a decision to learn commercial photography. Not only to teach students the availability for them, but that I had to find a way to prepare students for industry as a teacher. And how was I going to do that? I then went on to develop a 20-year career as a commercial photographer, hiring students as my assistants and training them on the job in the studio, and we will look at some of that work. I've been accused of talking and talking and talking. I think it comes with the territory of teaching. So what I think I should do to share with you, as well as discharge some of this anxiety, is show you some work and let you see the real onset of what after 40 years has been a rewarding and blessed way of living. I've traveled the world photographing. I've made books I'm sharing with you now. And so we're going to look at this boxing work. We're going to look at, and I'll talk a little bit about it while you're looking at it, but I'll try not to interrupt the work with my, and then we will look at some hats and hat knots, and then we'll take a break. Not a break, but I will stop the work and we'll talk about the transition and the importance as a faculty member that I think has made all the difference for me in teaching, and that I think it's made a difference for a lot of my students. So am I doing okay? I got to check with these, because these guys, see, one of the worst things about doing this, I told Bob this afternoon, the worst thing about having a lecture where you teach is that I usually lecture and then get on a plane and come home. I got to come back and see you people next week. It's just awful. But I am prepared to show this work now. So where is my man Ray? And listen, I want to say, first of all, there's some people I need to thank. I mean, I know I'm supposed to do that in the beginning, but I don't. Ray has been magnificent as the director of this space and the director of visual support and knowledge above all on how to get you organized and calm you down and treat you like you think you're supposed to be treated. So, my man, I give you thanks. There's some other people here. Ken Yurkovich, this gangster with this white jacket on sitting over here, this high thug sitting over here, has been working with me personally and supporting my work and my efforts in a way that it's been very important to me. Let me stop there. It's been essential to myself, to the institution we are in, to teaching. He's a fine young teacher. He's gone through with me from student to MFA at ICP in photography on his own. Alex, who's always been with me. Naomi Paul, who is the current TA in the photography department, who is exceptional, who is just a gift, and who's applying to her schools now to move on. Shamu, I mean, Tito, I'll talk more about him, but sharing with these guys has made it all possible. You understand? It's bringing it to them, sharing it, getting the feedback, and living a life that I've been responsible to my students in that has helped this work we're going to look at. So I hope the work is at least part of what I'm talking about. Anyway, as we can say, hit it. This is the body of work. Is it all right if I come up here? Do you guys mind? This is the body of work called double up. I call the work double up because in a boxing gym, when you're boxing, and I was boxing and training when I shot this work, you had to double up on the jab in order to be an effective puncher and fighter. You couldn't just throw one punch, you had to double up. These are all done in one gym. Many of these boxers are famous, well-known, and world champions. These are the Viruet brothers. You'll see them in focus later on. But they were world champions. This is the cover of the book. At that time, believe it or not, people still smoked in the gym. Can you imagine that now? These photographs are symbolic as well as realistic in me trying to portray the idea of what this place is and the evidence through my own personal vision that represents the space. All my life I grew up watching boxing with my family on Friday nights in San Francisco. All my father's friends would come over on Friday nights and they would watch Gillette Cavalcade of Sports, and these guys would all talk and bet on every round and talk a lot of trash. And you would always see these gangsters, or what I assumed to be gangsters, leaning over and whispering in each other's ears and talking and being. But at that time I was boxing, and so I had the right, as far as I was concerned, to step into any situation in the gym that was taking place and photographing it. This was Evander Holyfield's trainer, Don Turner. He's a wonderful guy. He's trained a lot of world champions. That gesture is my gesture in life. More guys who I just stepped in on, you know. These guys would come to the gym every day. And this was between 1983 and 1986. World famous trainers. Sammy Madison in the center used to run Stillman's gym in the Bronx. Right. Some people who know. I argued with this guy every day. And his name was Rocky. And he had been in prison for 15 years for murder. And this is the truth. And we argued every day. And he would tell me that I wasn't sophisticated about what he knew about, and I would tell him he didn't know what the word sophistication meant, and we went round and round and round and round. But he wore this pistol in his ankle every day, and at one point said, "I'm tired of you, let me show you what I'm talking about," and raised his leg up, and I made the photograph. These are gym bats. I call them gym bats because these guys used to just talk. This was one of the first early photographs that I had made that was a real educational exposure for me. I was looking at him in the mirror, and I was working with a flash at the time, and I didn't want to miss the photograph, but I knew I couldn't shoot the flash into the camera, into the mirror. And so it was the first time that I realized I could turn a flash around backwards and illuminate the guy from behind while I shot him in the mirror. And when I did that, I just thought that, well, there's only one me. Again, Jerry Cooney, Victor Valley, very well-known. Freddie Brown, Lightning Lonnie Smith. These guys are all the Viruet brothers. The middle guy fought Duran twice. This gentleman here, right now, he was 15 when this photograph was taken. He said he was going to manufacture boxing equipment. He now is one of the premier suppliers of boxing equipment in the boxing world today. His name is Grant Phillips. And when you hear commentators talk about fighters wearing certain boxing gloves, they're either wearing Everlast or they're wearing Grant. Well, this is the guy that owns Grant. He was 15, and this is just a photograph that describes. These are early photographs for me. From there, I began to question what else could I do? or what could I begin to do that would give me a way of photographing African American culture in particular, but in a universal way? And what were the symbols? What were the metaphors? What were the allegories? And I came up with hats, and that everybody wore hats, and the whole world wears hats. And so a friend of mine and I were walking down the street and were coming up with a title. He called it the Hat Knots, which was the perfect metaphor for haves and have-nots. I used to have a lot of fun talking to myself about these women on the poster saying, "Ooh, child, look at that man lift those weights. Ooh, he's so beautiful, but don't turn around. Don't let him see you looking." I have a lot of fun with photographs, doing that kind of silly stuff with. I was talking to students about having a press. Trying to get a sound take on this mic. I was talking to students about a press pass in class today, and I was saying there were certain photographs that you can't approach, particularly regarding the law enforcement community, without identification, and it's often depends on where and what's going on. Well, these gentlemen had accessed this fellow on the ground in a way that was just, and of course the imagery was all there for me, the woman looking in live with pleasure, all these contradictions and stuff while they're beating this guy up. But when I made the photograph and was standing there, the cops saw me and said, "Look, hey man, come here." And when I had a New York Times press pass at the time, they had to let me go. Otherwise, I certainly would have taken the camera from me.
Those are police officers?
Those are very much NYPD, New York's finest. Republican convention, George Bush. I'll never get it. It's had and had not. Just rhythm and timing, metaphor. This is my kind of sensibility. This is my sense of rhythm, character in a photograph. I think, is this it on this? Oh, okay. No, because, I'm gonna slow down because well, it's 5 o'clock already. This is a photograph that I like. I've been living in mostly, always in New Jersey for the last 10 years. This is Hoboken at the train station. I don't get Jersey at all. All right, I think this is the last one for this. Yeah, okay. Can you give me the lights for 1 second, right? I want to, at this point, and this is important, is at this point that as a teacher and a photographer and a creative person and whatever I'm supposed to be or wanted to be, I had to make a decision on how was I going to bring all these elements together so that one did not disrupt so much the other, or that I would not be walking around talking about I couldn't do this because I had to do that, or I couldn't do this because I had to do that, when in front of me was the opportunity, if I was willing to give and to share, I could bring it all together and make it all work. Now, I didn't know how to do that early on when I began, but what happened was, as I said earlier, students said, "Hey man, how are we going to make a living doing this? You're teaching this stuff, you want us to invest in this stuff, why should we? And where's the evidence that this is going to work for us?" And me and my big mouth, instead of saying, "Maybe it will, maybe it won't," I had to say, "It will, I'll show you how." Bob Rogers was there. The department ordered lights. We built studios. I actually learned to do this stuff in class with students. As terrified as I was of going out looking for work, I put together a portfolio and I began to find work. And as I found work, I hired students to learn who had learned with me in class, studying lighting and portraiture and how to use a 2 1/4 camera, which is different than the camera I normally use, how to use color, how to get accounts with labs. I began to put a portfolio together and take the portfolio around to magazines initially. I began to get work. From there, it went into album covers. From CD covers, it went into corporate work. It went into advertising. Next thing I know, we were rolling. The next body of work I'm going to show you is work exclusively done, except this photograph, because the magazine, they flew me to Chicago to do this and I couldn't take a student with me. But all these photographs that we're going to look at now, and it's not a lot, it's just a small, but it's to illustrate how teaching and working as a photographer came together for me because I shared my life with my students and embraced them rather than trying to keep that over here so that I could do this over there. So the next few photographs are actually, these are commercial photographs that we learned to shoot in our own vision so that we could sustain ourselves in the work and in the classroom as well as a teacher. Hit It. I love saying that's from the movie with John Belushi when they're in the, no, the other one, the early one. No, the early one when they were kids in college. Animal House, when they're in the bar and the cat says, "Hit it." The publisher of Daily News. This gentleman's a golfer. This gentleman is currently #1 in the world again. Who'd have thunk it? One of the things that was great is I got in a real argument with his father at the time. And when his father saw me stand up for what I was talking about, he said, "Go ahead, man, take the picture." And Tiger just said, "Whatever you want to do." Colin Powell at the Waldorf Astoria Hotel in his presidential suite where he stays when he was in New York, where he flew all his furniture into, oh, that's what generals do, I found out later. And Colin Powell, I must tell you, we were very anxious. Socrates Gomez assisted me on this shot, yeah. I was so nervous when we went in thinking that this guy was going to be this Republican. He was so cool. He was so New York. He was so hip. He just said, "Man, go ahead, man, let's talk. What's happening?" I was like, what? Musicians, great piano player, Rodney Kendricks. Frank Morgan, great alto player. We had a great time. This is also a great art director who did this color transfer. And this was all done with students. Jacob Lawrence, the great painter. P. Diddy, or Puff Daddy, or Sean Combs, or whoever he is today. It's great. He was very nice with me, man. I said, "Go ahead, man, take your time, light it." All these photographs had to be lit. And I had an assistant, Gerard Gaskin at the time, who had been with me for a few years, and we got so competent that we could walk into a space, and as complicated as a space would seem, we could light it instantly. I mean, we'd put a backlight on the back wall, a front light on the front wall, light the chair on the right. We knew how to dramatize an image, but this is all student-assisted work, which opened up Robert Indiana, great artist. Crazy, but hip. Whew. Jerry Allen, great piano player. Jill Nelson, writer. Slick Rick. national billboards. All these were billboard, national billboards. Students did all this stuff with me. From there, since I learned how to work in the studio, why not seize the moment? And I'd always been interested in nudes, both for aesthetic reasons and political reasons as well. I had a real tough time with the portrayal of black women in photographs historically, and decided that I was going to try and do something about it. And so I began practicing nudes. And this is about a book that's currently in print that I shot between probably 1992 and 1995, 96. Most of these photographs are undirected. These are models giving to me their own sense of self. My students and I painted the backdrops. We learned to be a full, self-contained unit of production. This is also this is a body of work that I still very much actually like. It's nice. I like standing here looking at these. I haven't done this before. This is great. From this body of work, I began to outgrow it as a primary focus point and began to look for other interests that were cultural and along my temperamental beat. And I had never seen marching bands until I moved to New York. I grew up in San Francisco, a very middle class, Eurocentric community, Fisherman's Wharf and Golden Gate Park and Pacific Ocean, but no marching bands. And when I first came to New York and began to see marching bands, I was taken aback. But then at some point, as I began to mature and settle into my career here at Queensborough and was being supported by the CUNY Foundation for Research, which has been an enormous contribution to my life and work. Because I've used the money to do the work and not dilly-dally. So I got to travel and make all these connections with black colleges and parades and stuff all over the country. So I have a forthcoming book now called Marching Bands, which will be our 5th book with my distinguished colleague Faustino Quintanillo and the prestigious Queensborough Art Gallery. These photographs were done over a 3-year period of time in different parts of the country. Black colleges in the South, the West, East Coast, New Orleans in particular. Gentleman was 83 years old in the Treme band in New Orleans, carrying a bass, drum, and cymbal. That's him when he's not when he's not in a parade. He's dap, awful dap. Every day like that, you know, when he's not in a parade. San Diego. Yeah, shooting into the light. There's nothing like Leica in Rodinal. First time being on football. This was a homecoming. I didn't even know what a homecoming game was. Oh man, this was amazing, man. I had no idea that all this ceremony and pomp and circumstance took place. This was Morgan State, down in Maryland, Baltimore. This is New Orleans again, just rhythm and carriage. Buffalo, New York, of course. Oh, Buffalo. This was the first time I had ever gone to a marching band competition in Atlanta, Georgia. 100,000 people to see marching bands over 2 days. Battle of the Bands, right? Who knew? Anyway, these women were rocking to the band, and this young woman turned around and saw me excitedly focusing the camera and smiled. New Orleans again. Again, where gesture in my work takes precedence, that thing he's doing with that hat on is so beautiful to me. Oops. Graffiti on a wall in New Orleans, appropriate, however. Beautiful gesture. Just grace. And the gentleman on the left celebrating him. Look at you, man, you look great. And this guy's just regal. Robert Frank, Roy de Carava, William Klein, Lee Freeland. All my influences right there. New York City. Multi-dimensional stuff going on in every pocket. Form is an important thing. This photograph here, this is one of the most important photographs that I had made up until that time in my life. I did not understand the ceremony of a marching band. I did not understand the ceremony of a homecoming celebration when a band takes the floor and the stadium is full. Then the band director comes on, and he comes on with this hat, and he's got a stick, you can't see it as well, in the front of him, with his hand behind his back, and he's making it, and this woman, I think I have this woman here is laughing at me because she's seeing how overwhelmed I am with how thousands of people are standing up for this guy, for the drum major to come in, and he comes in this strut that was just unbelievable. I also had a broken foot when I shot this photograph and didn't know it. Up early in the morning because you knew that there would be a parade and there'd be tubas and sousaphones and brass instruments. You know where the light's going to be. You know when the light hits those. That's just academic, and that's actually time learning how to make photographs. That you knew, you didn't know this would be there, but you knew this would be there. Right. I do. I love it. I hate to say it, but I do. And I had never seen anything like it before. This has been such a glorious opportunity for me to discover so much about myself, about black culture, about America in general, about the world. And the eternal late musician running to catch up. This is the book that we're publishing now. This book will be available in June, published through Queensborough. Faustino, myself, the Queensborough Gallery, we're doing it. This is our fourth book together, and I think this is a very personal body of work for me. Why? 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 Tell them. My sister died while I was in Africa. This is for her. It's called In Your Own Sweet Way. These photographs are done in about 5, 6, 7 different countries, 5, 6, 7 trips. Some by myself, some with other people. The most personal photographs inside were done where I was taken inside by people that knew, because you can never get inside of a compound like this without knowing somebody in Africa. You just couldn't do it. I mean, I couldn't do it. This is outside. These women are just beautiful, these beautiful dresses. And the architecture in Africa is very sophisticated. It's very different than a lot of what we perceive Africa to be in urban areas. Voodoo, for real. I mean for real. African sculptors, makers of masks and carvings. Sudan. I had just come back from Darfur. I had been doing a story on refugees, and I'd gotten into Darfur, and later we went down central Sudan, and this is what a gas station looks like. This is how they advertise it: 2 tires and a light indicates service. Rhythm, African rhythm, just rug, hand to mouth. Rhythm of the rug, all this stuff. Beautiful stuff, patterns, life so abundantly rich and visual. Everywhere, Senegal. I mean, who fishes like that? Just a ballet. Light, rhythm, children, work. Inside out, rhythm. I happen to like this photograph a lot. So this is what I've been doing. It's 5:30. I'm going to wrap up with one more body of work. I think that should be enough. The body of work that I'm going to show you now is the work that's in progress, that I'm working on now. It's very, very important to me as me evidencing a journey into finding my idea of vision. Isn't this great? These people exercise on the beach every day together in Senegal. They just run up and down, stretch, yin and yang. Darfur, refugee camp. This is Rhythmology. This is the body of work I'm working on now. While doing the marching bands, after leaving Grambling in a hotel room, drinking whiskey, talking about the rhythm of the marching band and how could you photograph rhythm, I came up with the concept called Rhythmology, which comes straight out of jazz language, bluesology, ornithology. This is Rhythmology. This is a concert between human behavior and life on Earth in a natural setting. Brazil. It's done on the shores of Bahia, Santiago. Brooklyn. This is when I could really swing in the streets. I can't do that stuff like that anymore. But again, gesture, form, rhythm. I was telling somebody, oh, I'm sorry when I bend down, that it wasn't until I looked at this work blown up like this that I realized that this was 8-4-2. It's just 8-4-2. It's pretty interesting. Quick. What else? There's nothing else. It's just speed. Right. And you have to understand that my back was turned. I was doing something, looking the other way. When I turned around, it actually frightened me. Because I didn't, what is this? It's warm in here, so I'm going to wrap up. Okay. I got somebody over here whispering in my ear, slow down, slow down. This is one of the photographs that I've made that I actually like for myself, screaming into the light. Early in New York, that's when I was spending a lot of time. I mean, I was a street photographer, period. Thank you very much.